Record on. Okay, I think I just did the recording thing for
Yep,
everyone. I'm sure if
great.
you guys got the message or I have to write a note or do anything like that.
Get a note from our moms.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, permission slip to go on the field trip and all that good stuff.
Exactly.
So, but welcome everyone. This is the Agile Endeavor, and for those of you who have not been here before, the Agile Endeavor is a group of job seekers that get together to run sprints in job seeking activities. So this is basically we get together and this is a review, and this review is a little special because we normally have people that can come in and give a little advice here and there, or talk to us about job seeking or how to better run sprints or how to better understand Scrum. But today we have a leading voice on LinkedIn, Amy, and she's going to talk to us about what it's like to be a recruiter, and tell us a little bit of best practices of what she is looking for in resumes and various things like that, and give you like best practices and how to apply for jobs. Amy Miller has
Awesome.
her own YouTube channel, which is I don't know how she does it, but she adds to it weekly at least, and they're always just absolutely phenomenal advice. So I highly recommend taking a listen to those two. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of open things up to Amy. Do you want to introduce yourself or?
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I'll just give you a quick little background on me. I'll try not to belabor that too much and really want this to be interactive. Like I can kind of give you my recruiting spiel and I can give you some high level advice, but I find these to be really, really valuable when folks are asking specific questions. Like, let's solve some real problems today. That's what I want to do. I want to like really dig into where's your blocker, what's going on, what's holding you back, and let's start moving those rocks. So, by way of introduction, Amy Miller, I've been a big tech recruiter for about the last decade or so. I've worked for some fairly large household names. You can check out my LinkedIn profile and kind of see where I've been hanging out. And I've been primarily in hardware for the last 3.5 years. So hardware engineering, building satellites specifically. And prior to that, I did a lot of software and software leadership recruiting, both at Microsoft and Google. Prior to that, I did a very brief stint at the government, which taught me a lot about well, a lot of things. We'll talk about that another time. And then I actually grew up in agency recruiting. So I got into recruiting 25 years ago, spent about a decade or so, 12 years or so in agency before I got into corporate recruiting. Started with a very small company and then went to some of these big boys. So seen a lot when it comes to job search and effective recruiting strategies and how companies hire. And so I do try to take all of those insights. I do have weekly videos on my YouTube channel, just youtube.com/Amy Miller. I also have a website, recruitinginyogapants.com, where I have tons of free resources, templates, FAQs, a list of coaches I recommend, anything and everything. And I'm always looking for ideas. So if y'all have any specific questions I haven't already answered, happy to turn those into blog form, video form, or FAQ form to further support folks. So that's me. All right. So Philip, is there any specific area we should start, or should we just do you want to hear like kind of the recruiter journey, like what happens when you hit apply? What does that look
Yeah,
like on my side? Would that be helpful?
let's start by talking about the evil robot that
Yeah.
that
I brought them. They're here. I have Sherman and I have Stella, and they're here to tell you that they don't get to play in my ATS, unfortunately. No, but I think that's such a great topic, Philip, and something that so many job seekers really struggle with. And I know I've certainly gotten my fair share of hand slaps over the years for being a bit vocal about my thoughts on this topic. And so here's what happens. I want to kind of share with you a little bit about the kind of the recruiter journey on the other side of the application. And what's really interesting when we think about the ATS, or the system that you're applying to, in most cases, online applications is probably about 10% of what I'm doing within that system. So it's a little bit like if you're in Excel every day, like maybe you're a financial analyst and you're running numbers and do a data analysis, doing all these things, data entry of that information is probably 10% of how you're using that spreadsheet, right? There's a whole lot of other stuff happening and formulas you're running and analysis you're doing and charts that you're building. And so it's really interesting that this is such a small part of my job, but it gets the most attention. So it's where a lot of folks feel stuck. I've made jokes in the past. I probably shouldn't have because now it's, backfiring on me, but I've made jokes years ago about, rescuing resumes from ATS black holes. And that is an unfortunate mythology, right? That a lot of folks are concerned about. So the way that we will use these evil robots, a couple things to be mindful of there. First of all, it's important to understand that there is no single ATS. It is not a single entity. We don't all have the same access to the same big old giant database that we choose to ignore. But there are over 200 systems on the market, 200 companies, I should say, that have systems on the market. So there's all kinds of, there's small, there's large, there's enterprise versions, there's really kind of cobbled together spreadsheet type versions. And really the purpose of those is to literally track that data. So we're tracking not only incoming applicants, but a lot of times there's also like hiring records. There's the requisitions are created there. Our interviews are scheduled within there. Our offers are generated and emailed from there. So it really is intended to be a system, a software package that enables us to do the recruiting workflow. So that could be starting with opening a role, accepting those incoming applications, reviewing and actioning those applications, setting up those interviews, recording feedback, documenting every other conversation along the way, and then ultimately ending in an offer, which is extended in that system, and then closing out that requisition with a finished, okay, we've made a hire, we're done. So that's what that system is for. Now, that said, with over 200 on the market, there are a near infinite number of ways to configure them. So the one caution I have for folks, it's very easy to fall down these rabbit holes. You see the marketing slicks from the ATS providers. You can do demos with some of them if you want. Like, this information is out there, and I would encourage you to research it if it helps you. But keep in mind that what they're selling isn't always what we're buying. I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, Taleo does all these things. Well, yes. And I've used Taleo 3 times at 3 different companies, very different experience every time. And by the way, had none of those features anytime. So it's really important to understand. It's like buying a car. You see the flashy model on the commercial, and it's got all the bells and whistles, and it does all the things, and it parks itself. And then you go into the dealership and you're like, hey, I want this car for 20,000. You're like, okay, that's great. Oh, but you want all those other features? That's 52,000. And so you might make the decision like, I can park myself. I don't need that. And so you buy the version that solves your immediate problem, which is transportation, but without the fancy bells and whistles that you saw in the commercial. So be mindful of that is my kind of big caution there. Most importantly, and this is my number one piece of advice when it comes to really anything recruiting related, but also certainly, interacting with these systems and tools that recruiters use, talk to the recruiters who are actually the end user. I could talk to you all day long about how I use my database. I could tell you how Google did hiring 4 years ago when I worked there. I always want people to go straight to the source, get the data, get the insight, get the information straight from the source. They may have changed their processes since I left. They may have a new feature implemented I'm not familiar with. Even within my own organization, maybe that team does something with online assessments that my specific team doesn't. So it's just really critical to kind of see past the noise and see past some of the clickbait stuff that we're all subjected to, and really understand like, okay, Philip, I want to work with you. Tell me how your process works. Tell me what you're looking for. So I always tell people, don't listen to me. Listen to the people who actually have the authority and the insight to get you where you're trying to go. So I can pause there. I want to be mindful of time. I could keep going, but I want to be mindful of time. But does that help clarify or answer any questions? Or is there anything I can go deeper on as far as that goes?
Feel free to come up here. Go ahead.
Well, Philip, I have a whole bunch of questions backlogged, and I don't want to get in the way of a lot of the people here. So I'm kind of holding off at the moment to be able to see if others can step in.
Okay. Are you sure? Anybody have any questions about the ATS software?
Yeah, I do. Quick one, Amy, if you
Yeah,
would.
of course.
So there are multiple software packages that multiple companies use that do the
Yes, sir.
ATS screening. Okay. Okay, got it.
Well, that use an ATS. So when we talk about
Yes.
screening, I want to be cautious of that because there are different ways that could be done. So I will tell you, I have used something called knockout questions at a couple of different companies. This is where we are taking the basic qualifications or the required information from the job description and turning that into what ultimately becomes a yes/no decision tree. So, for example, I work with an organization that has some ITAR restrictions. US citizenship, green card status, those kinds of things are required because of the kind of work that we're doing. So I, in theory, could use a knockout question, which would say, do you require sponsorship? If the answer to that question is yes, that is unfortunately an automatic disqualifier based on the needs of the role and our partnership with the government, right?
Okay.
So now what this does, however, and I've also used knockout questions in the past that have been like, yes, no, do you have 3+ years software engineering experience? Or, yes, no, can you relocate to Seattle, Washington? Things like that. The way that the person answers the question, like obviously a no, if that's a required question, that's going to create an automatic disposition. So I have set that up. I have set the parameters. I have enabled the automatic rejection email that everybody hates. That's my fault. But I want to be really clear. Those resumes and those applications are still visible. I can still log into that system and I can see my different tabs typically, and it'll be unreviewed, viewed, interview, disposition. Like there's different kind of statuses, right, for all of my candidates that are attached to that requisition. So I could actually click into that disposition tab, that rejected tab, and I can still see all the people who had applied and who were through this decision tree knocked out, so to speak. So nothing ever goes away. That's actually one of the interesting things about working for Google. We had, as you can imagine, millions of profiles in our database. And I would actually go and search for senior engineers that hadn't been updated in 5 or 10 years. Because at that point, I'm like, okay, if you were a senior engineer 10 years ago, maybe you're a manager today. And that's the pipeline I'm looking for, right? I was doing leadership recruiting there. So there's ways that we can go back and search, but I think the critical thing here that I want to be clear on is any kind of screening, whether that's an assessment or a knockout question or some kind of a pre-screen activity, it is set up by the user. So blame the loose nut behind the keyboard. That's my point.
Thank you.
So real quick, I'm gonna ask a follow-up question too. So what you're saying is that look at the job description you're applying for and make sure that you're qualified.
It's very, it's very important, and there's a lot of differences of opinion on this topic. A lot of it comes down to one very simple thing. Does this company have any restrictions such as OFCCP compliance that will drive certain behaviors? What I mean by that, you'll often find companies that list basic qualifications and preferred qualifications. I've got videos on this, so I don't want to belabor this too much. But the idea around that is the federal government, we have a partnership with the federal government. Maybe I'm the supplier to the toilet paper in the national parks bathroom, right? It could be something that simple. But I have a company of a certain size. I have revenue of a certain amount with the federal government. That means I am required to provide some EEOC data, and I'm required to manage what we call internet applicants in a certain fashion. Again, video that dives into this is about 5 minutes long on my YouTube channel. That means that only the applicants who fit the basic qualifications are ones that I am legally able to move forward with. So I will do a quick scan of the resume. If I don't have a knockout question situation, I'll do a quick scan. I'll sanity check, like, yep, I see the years of experience we need. Yep, I see the experience in GD&T or whatever it might be. those are the folks I will then move forward to my hiring manager. So again, I'm using my ATS, right? I'm hitting that button and I'm submitting, adding my notes. Here's why this person's great. If I've had a conversation with you, I'm adding those recruiter notes. I send that to the hiring manager. The hiring manager then does have the authority to pick and choose who they want to talk to from there. So I cannot say, hey, every single person I think looks great and I send to the manager is going to get an interview, because they do have, as I'm sure all of you would as well, they have limited time. Recruiting isn't their full-time job. So they sometimes have to make some tough decisions and be like, okay, well, Amy sent me 10 great people. I'm going to interview my top 5. You know, we'll hopefully make a placement from there. So that also can happen. But I think to your bigger point, Philip, understanding what's not negotiable is important, but also understanding what your competition might be. So if you're looking at a job description and you're saying, okay, there's 3 basic qualifications, there's 7 preferred qualifications, I can be 30% qualified for this job, 3 out of the total of 7, and that counts. That's somebody Amy's going to push forward. But am I potentially up against somebody that has 60%? 70%. So that's a judgment call. I'm all about encouraging people to shoot their shot within reason. I don't want to discourage anyone from applying, but it's understanding like, what are the must-haves, what's required, what's flexible. And I think there's also, it's very important to think about what's realistic. If I see a job description that has a list of 10 things, and there are things like must be a team player, must be a great communicator, how do you measure that on a resume? You can't. So skip that, ignore it, apply anyway. It's all very subjective. So I find those very frustrating myself. But anyway, you know, you have to kind of look at like, is this actually a measurable, you know, criteria, or is this some made up recruiter fluff? Just being honest.
Absolutely. Ed, you got a question?
Yeah. So while we are in the ATS realm,
Yeah.
The advice that I generally give people when I'm assisting them with resumes or whatever job recruiting is, given that 73% of statistics are made up on the spot, I would say that I would say 85% of the recruiters that you work with are semi-competent at best when it comes to understanding someone's individual journey. And you would want to look for the 15% where someone's at the best. But do you have experience as a recruiter that there's kind of a tiered hierarchy of sales development rep versus account manager versus senior account manager, where like you'll get a whole bunch of emails, for example, for a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs, and that might be at the lowest level of someone that's just them, they're pushing them out there, they're looking to be able to just shotgun and put out for recruiters versus how do you establish who is kind of a recruiter that's going to put more investment into identifying you as a potential candidate?
So, right. And so when we're talking about like, you know, account executives or sales folks from a recruiting perspective, that to me says agency recruiter. So correct me if I'm misreading that. I'm definitely getting agency vibes.
Like vendors that have worked directly with Google, vendors that are like, it's not going to be a full-time employee position. It'll be a contract.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gets a little trickier for sure. I mean, that's a great call out, Ed, because it does get a little tricky. I grew up in agencies, so again, I don't want to necessarily, you know, beat up my own, but we do see some bad behavior there. And especially for those vendors or what they call like C2C, corporate to corp kind of vendors, there is unfortunately a lot of kind of throwing it out and seeing if something sticks, which is really unfortunate. A lot of times those companies do not have direct access to the hiring authorities, which is also a pain point, right? I can walk into any of my manager's offices anytime and put my feet up on their desk and have a beer with them. And they are totally fine with that because I've hired 70% of them, by the way. But anyway, that's another story. But when we are dealing with agency, unfortunately, it does become really spammy because they're playing a volume game. They're shooting their shot, right? The same thing we complain about the other direction. Everybody just kind of spamming everybody and they're hoping that something sticks. So for me, I will put in as much effort as I think is being put in to reach me. If I get and I get them too. I get spam emails all the time because I talk a lot about engineering and satellites. I get a lot of emails that are like, hey, you should come be an engineer here. I'm like, yeah, no, I can't do math. You don't want me to be an engineer. So a lot of those I ignore, or a lot of those I just simply will not put effort into, because for me, it's not the fastest path to what I want. What I want is an interview. What I want is ultimately a job. That's not going to be the quickest path for me. So I will actually ignore a lot of those. But I do think the outreaches that do seem to be targeted to you, that do seem to be like spelling your name correctly, referencing something personal in your background. I saw this on your resume. I read that on your LinkedIn profile. Like, there should be these indicators that this person has very specifically targeted you, right? That's important. That's like my filter number one. Does this person know they're speaking to Amy Miller? Or am I just one more person in the mail merge list? Because if I'm one more person in a mail merge list, I am not spending my time on it. So that's kind of my first filter. But I think also agencies can be great, and we are going to see an uptick in contracting because a lot of full-timers are getting laid off. We see these, I've seen it several times in 25 years. So we're going to see these market shifts. So for me, I want to engage with agencies that I know have those partnerships already. So I'll tell you very, very bluntly, if I get laid off tomorrow, I survived today. We'll see what happens tomorrow. You never know. But if I were laid off tomorrow, I'm going to Search Wizards, which is a R4R, recruiting for recruiters agency that I know the CEO. I know people who work there. I have this history and trust with them. So I'm going to very carefully look at the agencies in my network, people that I know, people I've worked with in the past, maybe people other recruiters recommend. Oh, I had a great experience with Jen at Adecco. Okay, great. Give me her number. Let me call her. So I'm going to be a little more proactive and try to identify the ones that have some proof that they're good at their job. Because unfortunately, to your point, there's a lot that aren't. I'll make up a stat, 75% that are not great. So I want to kind of set those to the side and focus on the ones that I like.
I mean, they do result in real roles if you are brought on. I got into Google from a email that had 2 lines of descriptions.
Oh gosh.
that were not correctly spelled.
So it can work.
And you can be able to have an automatic response. But part of what I'm asking there is, so if they're directly targeting you, that's fantastic. What if you are in your part in your career, or you are in a place of transition where you are ending up in the mail merges instead? But how do you identify, if you've put out that minimal amount of effort, if you get a response back, where do you gauge or filter at a second level whether you should continue to work with these individuals?
Yeah, I want a very clear understanding of next steps. So I want to understand, like, okay, where do we go from here? I'm going to send you my resume. What happens next? And so I'm looking for, I've got a regular meeting every Thursday with the hiring leader. I'll be able to get back to you by Monday with an update. Okay, great. Like, I want to kind of have a timeline, a specific next step, and as much of a potential outcome as possible. Because if they're saying, hey, I'm going to submit your resume next week. Okay, great. I'm going to bug you on Tuesday, right? Because I'm not going to learn anything between now and then. Or if they're asking me, hopefully they can also answer questions. What can you tell me about the needs of this role? And I understand sometimes there's some secrecy around, they don't want to give you the client name, or they don't want to share, names of hiring leaders, things like that. And I understand that. But can you walk me through the problem that this organization is trying to solve with this contract role? So a good recruiter should be able to really educate you on that. They should be able to say, hey, we're hiring an analyst to come and do this body of work for 3 months that's going to result in X. Like, they should know that. I could tell you in great detail what my engineers are solving. And so I would expect any decent recruiter to have at least a baseline of, here's what we're trying to solve for. This is why this role's open. This is why filling it matters.
And this is kind of the last bit before opening it to anyone else. I'm sorry for taking the time.
No, not at all.
But I've actually discovered myself that just when I get a call out of the blue or I get an email out of the blue, my immediate questions are, okay, what's your prospective rate that you can offer?
Yeah.
What's who's your end clients? And what do you think the job is?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like, even if I'm being very straight with them, my question here, I think, is, are you passed up the chain where you're no longer interacting with, you still want to be polite in every possible interaction.
Of course. Yeah.
But if you are very direct, particularly if you're not someone who is a tall white male like myself, that can be seen as being aggressive or assertive.
Okay. Yeah.
So my question is, can you be direct in your first interaction with someone that's at this kind of shotgunning level or this SRE level and still have a good relationship with the agency overall? Like, how far does your first interaction translate up the chain?
I would say, so I personally appreciate direct. I would rather have direct, right? Because we're all here to get stuff done and make a couple bucks, right? I will say it is highly likely that those responses are recorded in the ATS, right? Some, like Google, for example, every single email that I ever exchange with a candidate at Google is recorded in our ATS, for better or worse. So there's always that possibility of, that's documented, that's copied word for word. I'm okay with that because, again, I think you and I are aligned on this. Like, I need to know, these are my important things. I need to know what the comp is. I need to know, is there an in-office expectation versus virtual? Is there, who's the end client? Because maybe I don't want to work for that company, or maybe I already work for that company, or who knows what. So for me, that level of direct, like, give me what I need, is greatly appreciated. So I would just say, will there be people who don't like that approach? Possibly. Are those people you ultimately want in charge of your career? I don't. I mean, maybe in a different, I don't know, depending on the economy, I might be begging that person for a job next week. I don't know, but I personally prefer direct, and I do respond to those messages and respond to those emails under the assumption that this is going to be copied into an ATS where it will live as my permanent candidate record with this organization for the rest of my life. That's how I approach that.
Great.
Excellent. So I've got another questions for you, and that is, how do you establish relationships with recruiters? On LinkedIn? How do you meet them? Is it just bribes? Should we send chocolate?
Yeah, a lot of us, are fueled by caffeine and alcohol. So keep that in mind. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think that's so interesting. And I it's kind of funny. I have a video. I kind of lost my mind when somebody actually mentioned bribery on LinkedIn once, and I lost it and railed about how that was absolutely horrible and did not make me any friends. But no, I think so. The unfortunate, I'm down for cookies, Amy, by the way. I do love a good cookie. I saw that. I was stress eating peanut M&Ms all day, so I could use something homemade. I look at it this way. The recruiting relationship, in spite of our best efforts, in spite of our well wishes, in spite of, regardless of how much we want to make friends, that recruiting relationship is at its foundational level transactional. I need to fill roles. You want to fill a role. Hopefully our interests merge and I'm filling a role with you. I'm solving both of our problems. So understanding that, it's important to target the right recruiters. I don't recruit software, right? I'm useless to software engineers. However, I have lots of software engineering friends, and I try to help them out. I've got some regulars that we chat once a week or so, just over DM every now and again, checking in. How are you doing? Things like that. They refer hardware people to me. I will send them, oh, I heard about this company. You might want to go check out this place. So we're developing this almost kind of a professional friendship where we're keeping each other maybe informed or sharing cool things or whatever, but we understand we're not necessarily helping each other with the transaction. We're not, kind of in the right space for each other, and that's okay. So I would approach it as starting with, who are the recruiters that actually recruit what I do? Because again, software people can come to me all day long and I'll spend time with you and we'll have a good time and we'll talk and we'll be buddies, but I don't have any authority or influence to get you where you're trying to go. It's just not my scope of work. So targeting the recruiters who actually recruit for what you want to do or currently do is kind of the number one rule. Secondly, are they at the companies you want to be at? And so again, I'm a corporate recruiter, so I kind of index heavily on the internal corporate side, but even with agencies, because here's the thing with agency recruiters, they work with companies that they have a contract. A lot of agency recruiters, I'm sure they mean it with the best of intentions, but I still don't like it. But a lot of agency recruiters will kind of do this like, oh, I can get you a job. I can market you. I can be your personal recruiter. No, you're not. Like you're just, no, that is called business development. And we are doing that to go get new contracts to go place people. So could be a nice side effect for you, maybe, but I'm also personally very skeptical of where my information goes. I don't want a recruiter sharing my resume unless I know where it's going and who it's being shared with, at least high level. Manager at Google, okay, fine, I'm good with that. But just random people all over the place, no. Do not do that to me. So going back to like the relationship building, think about the people who actually work in your niche. Think about the people who are in the right, whether that's geographic or certain companies, those kinds of areas, so to speak. And then I think finally, ideally people that you can kind of see some history. Do they have solid recommendations? Are they recommended by people that like and trust? Like there's so much value in that. And like if Philip introduced me to somebody tomorrow, I would take that very seriously. We've developed a friendship. I trust his advice. Like if he said, oh, you should talk to this person, I'm taking that call. So recruiters are the same. Talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends, who have you had a good experience with? And that's who I would want to pursue.
Awesome. We've got a couple more questions. Anu,
Awesome.
you want to come off mute and
Hi, I was giving a thumbs up. I did not raise my hand, but anyway, thank you for the podium. So Amy, my question to you is, there's $1 million question, right? I mean, in LinkedIn, how do you find candidates? As in, let's say you're not posting a requirement and you want to look for candidates. Is it good if I have my green banner on? Do you search candidates that way? Or is it okay if I don't have it? Because I'd been having it there for quite some time. I'll also tell you the reason behind it, right? So, and I understand the market is dull or whatever, and I'm also transitioning right now. So does it send some kind of a message to have my green banner on for a longer time? Or is it okay to just take it down? But then I want to understand who do the recruiter target, right? I mean, do they look for first them?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love this question. This is, and again, like everything in recruiting, and I hate this, but the answer to every recruiting question, it depends, right? It depends on, the person on the other end. It depends on that particular recruiter's thought process or belief system or philosophy. I have studied this a lot. I've talked to literally hundreds of recruiters about this exact topic, and not to continue pitching the channel, but I have a video on this as well. So, but my personal opinion, this is again coming from a corporate internal perspective, I prioritize green banners. The reason I prioritize the green banner is because I don't like rejection. So why wouldn't I shoot my shot with people who are signaling that they want to talk to someone like me? I have no desire to like drag people kicking and screaming out of their job. I want people who want to come work with me. I want people who are open to an email from me. So the green banner, I personally will filter by the green banner, and I will start there. Now, the flip side of that, again, more of an agency thing. There is I think it's a mythology, but there's maybe a conventional wisdom we can say out there, particularly on the agency side, that agency recruiters are paid to find the unfindable. So there's an argument sometimes that, well, if I'm an agency recruiter and I'm not kicking down doors and dragging people out of their cubicles, I'm not doing it right. That's the silliest thing ever. And I am so glad I outgrew that. 20 years ago, I probably would have said the same thing. I've matured. I made all my mistakes before the internet, thank goodness. So I will say it's one of those things you have to A/B test a little bit. Like, do you notice an uptick in interest or profile views or in mails with it on? You can also remove it publicly and just have it open to recruiters. So that's a way to keep it like it's not as visible to your general network, but recruiters like me who are filtering by that will then still be able to see that. And again, those people go to the top of my list. I will start there every time because again, I want to fill roles and I want to fill roles fast. Why would I not take the person who's readily available? Like, come on, let's go. You're open, let's go.
A quick follow-up question on that, right? So when you scan people with the green banner, does it show you or does it tell you how long this person has been looking for a job or how long the banner has been on?
I don't think it does. It's not something I've looked for, and I would be very surprised, actually. I don't think that's an available filter. It's just it's like a yes, no. It's on or it's off, right? From my view.
Right.
So
right. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate the question. And
Yeah,
thanks,
of course.
Philip, for the opportunity.
Awesome. Ed, let's get around to you. Right?
Let's follow up on a previous statement here. So it sounds like a lot of being able to find a quality recruiter is going to be a matter of word of mouth. Is going to be a matter of being able to find the people that have had good recruiter experiences. For those that, it seems like finding a good recruiter is a little like finding a good attorney. In that if you don't have someone that's had a good experience, you're in a kind of very challenging position. So is there a point where do you as a recruiter go to particular meetups, or do you have particular ways that I as a person, if I went to certain things, could increase the point of a warm contact or an interaction? So are there larger group events that you go to be able to have a sense of people that are looking in the areas you're looking for?
The pandemic turned this on its head, for sure. I will say I definitely was big into I'm in Seattle area, so I don't think they have these anymore, but there was a Prolango, which was a big networking event that was headed by my old pal, Paul Anderson, years ago. And so I would attend those. I would do, I would try to go to developer meetups and things like that. Sometimes recruiters aren't welcome there. We kind of get the side eye and they don't want to sit there at their parties. But I think, honestly, Ed, I feel like if it were me, I would focus more on hiring managers and peers.
Okay.
I would be more focused if I'm thinking about expanding my network and I'm thinking about, getting connected to opportunity, because that's really what we're looking for. We're trying to connect to opportunity here. That's our goal. I want to actually go to the people who can make a decision, and that's the hiring manager. So I will go to those meetups and I want to talk to engineering leaders.
Yeah.
I want to talk to accounting leaders, that kind of thing. So I'm not necessarily chasing recruiters so much. There's value in that if you want, and it's good to have kind of a stable of recruiters that have regular opportunities I might be interested in. But I think there's more value in developing those industry connections.
Okay.
Secondly, I'm looking at peers. Hey, Anu, you're doing the same job I want to do. Your career path looks so interesting to me, and I'd love to figure out a way to get on it. Who did you work with? Do you have a recruiter that you partnered with? Was there a leader that mentored you? I want to tap that peer knowledge as well, because developing those peer relationships can turn into referrals. And I will tell you, anytime referrals are my third source of hire. Third. My biggest source of hire, 3 years running, direct applicants. My second biggest source of hire, same time span, sourced candidates. So we've gone and found. Third biggest source of hire, direct referrals. So when I get a referral, and whether that comes in through the ATS officially, whether one of my colleagues calls me up, hey, I've got this resume, immediate action, immediate, because again, low hanging fruit. Give me the open to work people. Give me the referrals. Give me the people that are proactively signaling they want to talk to me. I'm going to prioritize them every time. So I think, again, not to minimize the value of connecting with recruiters and meeting them out in the wild. I think that's great. It would probably be third on my list. I'm going to target hiring leaders. I'm going to target peers. And then the recruiters are kind of a nice to have.
Great.
I'm gonna ask Amy if she will. I know that she's sitting over there and has a brilliant question loaded. So I'm gonna ask Amy if she has a question she'd like to ask. But you, I
And
always put you.
cookies.
I always put you on the spot, Amy.
I'm stuck on the cookies.
I guess, excuse me, a lot of us here come from job hackers, which is often
Yeah.
people who are in transition in their careers, moving from one thing into another. And as a recruiter, do you have any advice for us?
Absolutely.
What, you know,
Transition is tough.
especially in the world where entry level, 3 years of experience, excuse me, that's not entry
Mhm.
level. But
Exactly.
yeah.
Transition is tough. So my number one piece of advice, which is sometimes harder, especially if you've already separated, do it within your current organization. I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm a recruiter, been a recruiter for a long, I'm absolutely not qualified to do anything else. So I'm kind of screwed. But let's pretend that I woke up tomorrow and said, I want to be a program manager. I think I could do that. I now have two choices in front of me. I can pursue external PM stuff. I'm going to be entry level because I've never done it. I might have some transferable skills, but I've never had the title. I've never done the full job. So I can go externally. Now I'm battling that potential cut in pay, starting from the ground up, trying to re-earn the credibility I've built in my current career. So that's a challenge. I can also potentially pivot internally. Easier said than done. I know that doesn't always work for everybody, but that is the fastest path because when you are internal, you are a known entity. You hopefully have a boss that's supportive of, you know, let's get you some training. Let's take advantage of this class. Let's, you know, go look at these options, you know, maybe do a stretch assignment, things like that. You can find mentors internally. Maybe your boss isn't supportive. So you're doing this on the sly without them knowing. You're now exploring like, hey, you're a PM. I want to know how you got into it. I want to understand the path there. So anything that you can do where you have credibility and you are known and you have kind of the security of your paid job, you can start kind of chipping away at some of those rocks. You know, I don't have experience. I don't have the degree. I don't have the technology. You can start building on that. Now, if you're going outside and you're just starting fresh, it's very much going to be targeting and understanding how companies hire is so important in this because I get a lot of people who've come out of boot camp, for example, software boot camp. You know, well, I was a car salesman for a long time and then I went to this, you know, 6-month boot camp. Now I'm a full stack developer, but I'm not entry level because I've got 20 years of experience doing something else, but not engineering, right? And so there is this difficulty. And so understanding how companies hire, and I'm using kind of that software engineering as an example, because a lot of the entry level or early career software engineers are coming up through the college ranks. Their large companies in particular have entire armies of recruiters that's all they do is university recruiting. And that pipeline is intended to be, okay, you've got enough knowledge to be dangerous. We're going to bring you in and we're going to mold you and shape you and teach you and turn you into a full stack engineer. Harder to do that from a boot camp. It's doable, but it can be a little bit harder because a lot of people will come out of those transitionary trainings and they think it's a little Dunning-Kruger effect sometimes because they think like, hey, I've done this for 6 months. I'm a full stack engineer. And then you have full stack engineers who are like, pick a lane, you know, please learn front end really, really, really well. And then we'll get you exposed to other stuff or back end or whatever. And so you have to also think about that, right? Like software engineering is this big. how much of it do I really know? Okay, I need to get honest with myself about that as I'm making this transition. And then also, are there organizations that have the infrastructure needed for me to grow successfully? Because I got to take my knowledge from here to here to here to here to here over years and time and projects. So a lot of times startups are not good for this. Large companies may not be great for it because, again, they have those very specific pipelines and entry points. So finding almost kind of that mid-career, mid-size organization that has the internal bench strength to teach you and mentor you, but then also the flexibility to have that ramp time. That's the biggest challenge. And I get a lot of people, I even see it within my current role. There's a lot of frustration and like, oh, well, why can't you give somebody a chance? And, why do you need 7 years of experience and that kind of thing? Like, okay, but you're the first person we're hiring to do the thing. Like, if you don't have the knowledge already, we're in trouble because nobody here has it. So it's really understanding and having a real honest conversation with yourself and the hiring team or the recruiter or the whoever's like, I'm coming in with this knowledge. I know enough to get started in this field. Is there going to be the infrastructure and the mentoring and the guidance to grow me? So yeah, tying it back to, like you said about, 3 years plus required. Of course, that's not entry level. I don't know why it gets classified that way. It's silly. 1 year, I might be able to meet you halfway on, but 3 year, that's mid-career for me. But beyond that, I would try to identify people who had a similar path. So again, using myself as an example, if I want to make that leap from recruiting to program management or HR or something like that, I'm going to look for people who are in the role that I want. And then I'm going to start looking at their backgrounds. Where are the commonalities? Where is something that I can leverage and kind of be like, hey, we went to the same boot camp. You're a couple years ahead of me. I'm really interested to learn how you got there. What tips do you have? What tricks, how did you learn this? How did you get exposure to that? And people like to talk about themselves, right? If I'm like, Philip, walk me through your background, right? Hey, tell me all the cool stuff you've done. I think he'd enjoy sharing that with me, right? We like telling our stories. So finding those peers, what do you think?
Yeah, I like talking about myself way too much. So.
We all do. It's a human condition for sure. But that would be my thing. I want to tap that brain trust of the people who've gone before me. And there's also, there's the ego driven. I like to talk about myself. But I think most of us also want to help pay it forward, right? Like we've been there. We clawed our way out of whatever, and we've worked hard. And if I can put a hand out and help somebody else get here, there's an emotional currency payoff for me as well. Just doing something nice for someone in my industry. So I'm targeting peers. And I'm targeting leaders who maybe had similar upbringings and backgrounds. And I want to just be a sponge and like learn everything I can about what helped them get where they are. Is there additional training? Are there certifications? Are there project or side things I should be doing? Should I be developing my own apps in the App Store? Like, is that going to be something that's interesting? Should I do more GitHub stuff? Is that something that'll get me noticed? So I want to understand what are the professional love languages of the people that can get me where I want to go. And that's the action I'm going to take.
Excellent. So we do have a couple people with raised hands right now.
Yeah.
But before I call on them, before I ask them, I want to open it up to some of the people who have been quiet. Is there anyone here that's been quiet for a while that wants to? There's 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that everybody is heard and gets question answers. So is there anybody here that does not have their hands up that'd like to speak? Okay.
I'll come back if I have to.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and go with Edward. You had your hand first, so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of following up on some of the things that we've said here and in the past. When it comes to roles where companies are they're exclusively looking for university or they're looking for younger roles, and there are people that because of where they're in transition, they don't have money to be applying for
Sure.
work and being in a new school program, but they are
Right.
at that same level.
Right.
Is there a particular hard break-off point where like these programs are designed because they're getting funding, so they have to be catering to students, or other kinds of things along those lines?
It's a good question. I'm sorry. You finish your thought on that. I'm
Well, if
thinking
like
about.
if you see
yeah.
a summer internship program
Yeah.
and they say that you need to be in a current class, is the reason that they're saying that because it's how the program is built around like a requirement for funding or requirement for keeping the class going? Sorry, requirement for keeping the internship? Or is it a matter of that you could be able to apply as long as you establish that with them, yes, I understand I'm not going to be continuing past this summer?
Oh, that's interesting. Internships I'm not as familiar with. It's a really interesting question, and I'm going to go research it because I'm actually not sure. So Philip, I will send you a response on this that you can pass along because now I'm curious. So internships, I'm not sure, but what I can tell you about the more traditional like new hire program or university recruiting program, that headcount is established a year prior.
Mm-hmm.
So when we sit down and we're developing our, recruiting strategy, and I've had these I've been in these conversations with HR and leadership, and we're saying, okay, you're getting, X amount of dollars to spend on staffing, or you're getting X amount of, head count or whatever. Then we start drilling that down. How are we spending that? How are we spending those dollars? How are we spending that head count? And we're looking at our bench strength. We're looking at our seniority. We're looking at attrition. We're looking at gaps in the current team. And we're carving out headcount for those different areas. So headcount for student programs or campus hiring might be, hey, you're going to get 100 heads next year. 17 of them are going to be dedicated to university hiring. And that goes to our university recruiting team. They're tasked with filling those 17 roles. University recruiting has very specific rules of engagement. They work with students and graduates up to typically 1 year post-grad. Some might be 6 months, but typically I've seen 1 year. So anyone, like for example, if somebody who was a full-time student and graduated in May applied to one of my roles, I'd be like, call me back in a month because I need to get you past your 1 year. I cannot actually touch you. I have to send you to the university team because you fall under that purview. Now, this is, again, of course, specific to large companies, right? Big tech in particular. But the bigger idea is those headcount targets and that number of roles that we're looking to fill were established 9 months ago, 12 months ago. So that rarely changes. We do every now and again see like, oh, we had room for some extras, or we had to give some headcount away to another team, but it's usually pre-established long before the hiring is actually announced and the interviews start. So if you're somebody that, is kind of in that gray area, you were a later in life graduate or a boot camper or a transitioning professional, that may not be the pipeline for you, but there's other alternate ways in. Sometimes you might want to look at military hiring, veteran hiring, if you're, coming from, have ever worked in the, done any services, right? Any armed services. You may look at, there are some companies that'll have like their own internal training things, like, it's like a Google boot camp, if you will. That's probably not a real thing, but they have those kinds of preset pipelines. So it's really important to, again, just kind of look at each company individually, talk to their recruiters if you can, and understand like, okay, this is how hiring happens and this is how they're investing, because it's an investment. When we're hiring new grads, when we're hiring those true entry-level talent, we're not hiring you because we're expecting you to come in and deliver production code in 3 months. We're hiring you to grow you and develop you into a full-fledged engineer that will hopefully pay off starting in year 2, right? That first 6 months, that first 9 months, that first year is all about ramp and kind of filling in the gaps and taking the foundation from your training and adding on to that and kind of making you this fully baked engineer, if that makes sense.
Awesome. And yeah, I just wanted to, I ran across a like I guess it's a boot camp. It was a coding thing that I heard it on NPR and I checked
Yeah.
it out the other day. Companies are sponsoring positions for these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is another good way of kind of getting in if you want to be,
Absolutely.
you know, a coder and everything
Absolutely.
like that. I know Tech Systems sponsored a number of places. The one that I looked that was on
Mhm.
NPR. And if anybody has any questions about that, I'll get to you afterwards. So we have one last question here. Anu, you want to wrap up with a final question?
Yes. So my question, Amy, is when I have to apply, let's say you're putting a job on LinkedIn and then I applied
Mhm.
there. So are you as a recruiter only looking at my resume, or do you take the time to go look at my LinkedIn profile as well? Or yeah, let's just I
Yeah.
want to hear you on that.
So, there's some, I saw a really interesting post. I'm so proud of myself for not commenting. I'm learning to just scroll past. Just keep scrolling, Amy. Don't do it. Don't fall for it. Saw an interesting post where someone who's not a recruiter said that recruiters are like all up in your business, Googling you, going 20 pages deep into your, oh my God, what did a new tweet 10 years ago? I don't have time for that. I do not have time. I am not interested. I do not care. Don't do it to me because I said some snarky stuff 10 years ago. So for me, I'm looking at the resume. That's it. As long as I get what I need from that resume, there is no need for me to go any deeper. I'm taking that resume, I'm sending it to the hiring authority. We're moving through the interview process. That's all I need to know. Now, if there are gaps and maybe I'm looking at the resume and I'm going, okay, there's some good stuff here. I think I see a fit. I think I see what I need. I may go to your LinkedIn profile and try to fill in gaps. But more often than not, I have what I need, including your contact info, including your interest, because you applied, like that's a big box to check off. So for me, the time investment of going and doing all this unnecessary research does not pay off. What am I going to learn that actually helps me make the decision to move you forward that I don't already have on the resume, right? And so I will also say, just kind of as a follow-up to that, I may get a bunch of applications and maybe those applications aren't meeting the mark. The hiring manager doesn't like them. We've had some, not great interviews, whatever. Now I have to go search. I'm probably starting with LinkedIn. I actually did a lot of sourcing on Twitter for what it's worth. Software engineering managers, for some reason, love Twitter. I made a lot of hires from Twitter. So wherever the fish is biting, that's where I'm going to go. But again, kind of that same rule applies. I just want to learn enough to say, oh yeah, this is somebody I should talk to. This is somebody I should learn more about. Do I have contact information? Do I have a way to DM them, tweet at them? I will put contact me on your blog. Hey, I'm a recruiter creeping on you, whatever. So that's all I want. I'm just looking for enough information to get you in process. I do not need to do a deep dive and get all up in your business and figure out what your favorite potato is. Like none of that's my business. I just want to know that you fit the job and we can start a conversation. So for me, I'm not looking any further than I have to. I got other people to look at.
Right.
It is getting very, very close to time. But if you don't mind going over just a little bit, I have a final
Absolutely.
question.
Yeah, no problem.
That question is, what do you want to see in a resume? How do you want it to look? When you're looking at a resume, what do you want? And
clean.
Just a brief. Yeah.
I want clean. I want simple, uniform font, decent size. 11 points, great. 12 is better. 12 might be a little big. Decent white space so I can kind of see, where things break. Accomplishments, numbers. I want to be able to read your resume because I'm looking at your resume through the lens of a specific hiring need. That can be, I have an actual job in mind. I need to find a structural analysis engineer who's done modeling and FEA and Craig Bampton or some, that's the filter I'm looking through. Or I'm looking for general, like, I need space people. I need people who've worked at, NASA and Virgin and, SpaceX and whatever. Like, you name your space companies. I'm looking for the context that tells me what you've accomplished. Numbers, specific accomplishments, date ranges. Like, those are the things that matter to me. So I want to see, title is helpful because that sometimes maybe is a keyword search we're doing. I try to not over index on like company names because great people come from all over the place. I don't want to limit myself. But I want to see, like, here's an example. I'll just, again, using myself, right? I could say, I'm a lead recruiter hiring hardware engineers for the last 3 years. Okay, that's an accurate statement. It's not very exciting, but it's accurate. Or I could say, I'm a senior recruiter working for a startup within a giant organization, focusing on structural, mechanical, and manufacturing engineers that build spacecraft. And I averaged 3 hires a month consistently at the senior level over the last 36 months. Who do you want to talk to? Like, there's a big distinction between, oh, here's a recruiter who hired hardware people, and here's a recruiter who brought in, 90 rocket scientists. Like, one's more exciting than the other. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking, so like aesthetically simple, clean, clear, no pictures, no fuzzy stuff. And then content wise, paint me a picture. I want to visualize what it is you delivered. So I always recommend every year when you get your performance review, what earned you a bonus? What got you promoted? What were the key things that you delivered that made your boss look good? That should be on your resume.
That's incredible. Quantitative accomplishments.
We love data.
Well, I cannot thank you enough. This has been absolutely eye-opening and rewarding, and I hope everyone
I'm
here
so
is finding
glad.
value in this. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and we'll just have a
I just
good night.
briefly wanted to say I run a resume office hours every other Wednesday,
Oh, nice.
where Philip assists with. And I'm going to, in my connection with you, I'm going to extend that invite to you for whether
Thank
it's next
you.
Wednesday or other times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would love to hear if what we are passing on to folks like who are on this call is the
Yeah.
kind of information you would want people to hear as a recruiter.
I'd be happy to listen in. Absolutely. Any way that I can help. I mean, I was telling Philip, like, these opportunities just they feed my soul. I mean, I know I was that job seeker years ago that didn't know what I didn't know, and you're getting all this conflicting advice and you're hearing all these different inputs, and it's like, oh my gosh, who do I listen to? Who do I even like? It's scary, because you just don't know. So I appreciate the opportunity. Again, run it through the filter of like, does this apply to my industry? Does this make sense? Does the person with authority agree with Amy? No, I'm not listening to Amy. That's okay. My ego can take it. But no, I appreciate the opportunity. It's rewarding for me. So thank you for having me. And I would love to listen in to future calls. So just let me know.
Well, Amy, we certainly appreciate this. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.